As Japan launched its surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, thrusting the United States into World War II, the Imperial Japanese Navy had 10 aircraft carriers in service that day. Throughout the war, the Imperial Japanese Navy had 25 carriers that were in service or commissioned at some point. When Japan surrendered on September 2, 1945, the one-strong Navy had 4 carriers left, some of which were still damaged and never fully repaired. Similar to the channel's episode about US carriers during World War II, this will be a surface-level overview of each of the Imperial Japanese Navy aircraft carriers and classes that were in commission during the war. Note, we will not count any ships that were still being built and not in commission yet, or the hybrid battleship carriers Hyūga and Issei. This video will also not cover the Imperial Japanese Army carriers, which would deserve its own video, so let's jump in. Japan's first aircraft carrier, Hōshō, was commissioned in 1922 and was built for a dual role as a seaplane and aircraft carrier. Based on a light cruiser hull, it was the first ship to be constructed keel up and completed as an aircraft carrier, and the first aircraft carrier in general. Hōshō featured a full-length flight deck and a small island when first commissioned. However, within 2 years it was removed as it was seen to impede deck operations. After war was declared with the United States in December 1941, Hōshō escorted the battleship force during the Battle of Midway in June 1942. After Midway, it was primarily used as a training ship and had the flight deck lengthened and widened in 1944 to better suit this purpose. It survived 3 bomb hits in March 1945 when at Harbor and Kure, and slightly damaged during the July US airstrikes. Hōshō survived the war and was scrapped in 1947, after being used for repatriation duties. Converted from a cancelled Akagi-class battlecruiser in 1923, Akagi was Japan's first large aircraft carrier. Completed in 1927, it had 3 flight decks, 2 hangars, and an auxiliary hangar. With the layout not deemed efficient or effective, Akagi was taken out of service in 1937 to receive a full-length flight deck, a small port-side island, and a single downward-facing exhaust funnel. Akagi is still considered one of the, if not the most, famous Japanese carriers due to its wartime exploits. Akagi was one of the 6 carriers that took part in the Pearl Harbor attack and saw action at Rabaul, the Dutch East Indies, Port Darwin, and the Ceylon operations. Akagi's most famous action, however, was the Battle of Midway on June 4, 1942, as one of the 4 Japanese carriers sunk during the battle. It was fatally damaged by 2 bombs from American dive bombers, being scuttled the next day. Kaga started life as a Chitose-class battleship, but was converted to an aircraft carrier on a slipway in 1923 due to the Washington Naval Treaty. It was swapped in to replace the earthquake-damaged battlecruiser Amagi. Kaga was built up similarly to Akagi, with a 3 flight deck arrangement when completed in 1928. In 1934, it went to the yards for an extensive reconstruction to receive a full-length main flight deck. Kaga was lengthened by 34 feet, had an underwater protection added, received a small starboard side island, and a downward-facing exhaust funnel. Operationally paired with Akagi, Kaga took part in many of the same actions as Akagi during World War II. Though Kaga was present during the Pearl Harbor attack, it would miss the Indian Ocean battles in April 1942 due to a grounding earlier in the year. Kaga was also one of the 4 Japanese carriers sunk at Midway, being hit by 4 bombs by American carrier aircraft, being scuttled later in the day on June 4th. With the aim to benefit from the tonnage loophole in the Washington Naval Treaty, which didn't account for carriers under 10,000 tons to a country's tonnage, Ryūjō was designed as a light carrier with 1 hangar deck to support 24 aircraft and would come in at 8,000 tons. This air group was deemed too small, so a second hangar deck was added into the design, at the cost of bringing the tonnage to 12,500 tons fully loaded. After entering service in 1931, Ryūjō was plagued with stability problems, being sent to the yards in 1934 to address the issues, and then again in 1936 with an additional deck added to her forecastle. Due to its smaller size, during the war it was relegated to smaller and secondary operations, but could still carry around 48 planes. Ryūjō covered the landings of the Philippines in December 1941, the invasion of Java in February 1942, and the Indian Ocean raids during April. During the Battle of Midway, it was part of the diversionary fleet attacking the Aleutian Islands chain in Alaska. With the loss of 4 carriers at Midway, it was pressed into a more primary role, taking part in the defensive campaign for Guadalcanal in August. During the Battle of the Eastern Solomons on August 24th, Ryūjō was sunk by American aircraft, taking 4 bombs and a torpedo before sinking. As the first keel-up fleet carrier designed for the Navy, Sōryū would serve as a general baseline for Japanese fleet carrier designs moving forward. Laid down in 1934, Sōryū was completed in 1937 and weighed in around 16,000 tons, much lighter than Akagi or Kaga. It featured a cruiser-type hull, modern machinery, 2 hangar levels, 3 elevators, and could carry 71 aircraft. Sōryū was inadequately armored, notably over machinery and magazine spaces. It had a small island on the starboard side, and 2 downward-facing exhaust funnels on the starboard side. During World War II, Sōryū was one of the 6 Pearl Harbor carriers, and soon after detached to help support the invasion of Wake Island in mid-December with the carrier Hiryū. Part of the invasion of the Dutch East Indies, Sōryū also took part in the attack on Port Darwin in February 1942 and the Indian Ocean raids in April. One of the 4 carriers at the Battle of Midway on June 4th, Sōryū was hit by 3 bombs at the same time as Akagi and Kaga, sinking later that day. Hiryū was a near sister of Sōryū, taking lessons learned in the design to improve the ship. Around 1,400 tons heavier than Sōryū and laid down in 1936, Hiryū featured additional armor, though still not entirely adequate. The beam was also increased for better seakeeping and stability. The main visual difference between the 2 ships was Hiryū's port side island, compared to Sōryū's starboard side island. Completed in 1939, Hiryū was the last Japanese carrier to be fitted with a port side island, an experiment that Akagi also took part in that was deemed unsuccessful and it adversely affected flight operations. Operating with Sōryū, Hiryū was part of the Pearl Harbor attack and had an extremely similar combat history. However, during the Battle of Midway on June 4, 1942, Hiryū initially escaped destruction unlike Akagi, Kaga, and Sōryū. Hiryū was able to successfully launch a strike against the U.S. carrier Yorktown, but was caught later in the day by American dive bombers. Hiryū was hit by 4 bombs, fatally wounded, and would sink on June 5th. After the Washington Naval Treaty expired in December 1936, Japanese naval planners looked towards the future with a larger carrier design that featured a large air group, ample protection, and speed. The Shōkaku-class was the result of this vision, consisting of Shōkaku and Zuikaku, being laid down in 1937 and 1938 respectively. Using Hiryū as the general design, the new ships were 100 feet longer, more than 8,000 tons heavier, and were able to operate 72 aircraft and 12 spares with the now standard 2 hangar design and 3 elevators to keep up flight operations. They were widely considered one of, if not, the best carrier design going into World War II. With Shōkaku completed in August 1941 and Zuikaku in September, they operated together and took part in the Pearl Harbor attack in December. At least one of the carriers took part in every carrier battle of the Pacific War, minus the Battle of Midway. During the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, Shōkaku was damaged and Zuikaku's air group was decimated, so they needed to return to port and missed the critical Battle of Midway. Both ships took part in the Battle of the Eastern Solomons in August, Battle of Santa Cruz in October, and the largest carrier battle, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, on June 19, 1944. During the battle, Shōkaku would be hit by 4 torpedoes from a U.S. submarine, sinking soon after. Zuikaku was used as one of the diversionary decoy carriers to draw the U.S. Navy carriers away from the invasion fleets during the larger Battle of Leyte Gulf on October 25, 1944, being sunk by 7 torpedoes and 9 bombs. Based on fast oiler hulls, strengthened for future light carrier conversions, the Shōhō-class, sometimes referred to as the Hiyō-class, consisted of Shōhō and Ryūjō. Shōhō was completed originally as a submarine tender in 1939, not as an oiler as originally intended. Ryūjō would be converted into a light carrier before entering service and was completed in 1940. Ryūjō acted as a template for the modified light carrier concept for future conversions. It was fitted with a full-length flight deck and 2 elevators to serve the single hangar, which could hold around 30 aircraft. Shōhō's conversion was completed in 1942 to a similar design. Shōhō would be the first Japanese carrier sunk during World War II, falling victim to American strike planes during the Battle of Coral Sea on May 7, 1942. American pilots claimed it was hit by 7 torpedoes and 13 bombs. Sōryū would play a secondary role during the Battle of Midway, was an active combatant during the Battle of Santa Cruz in October, and then during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. Its final action was during the Battle of Leyte Gulf on October 25, 1944, acting as a decoy carrier and being sunk by multiple bomb hits and 2 torpedo hits. Along with merchant vessels, the Imperial Japanese Navy subsidized the construction of passenger liners in the late 1930s with the ulterior motive to convert into aircraft carriers. 2 large liners were converted to become the Hiyō-class light carriers, Hiyō and Junyo. Laid down in 1939, both were requisitioned by the Navy in 1941 to convert into carriers whilst under construction. The 2 ships notably had the largest island structures for Japanese carriers to date, with the exhaust stack integrated and sloped outward. Protection was limited, some watertight compartmentalization was also included, and the carriers featured 2 hangars, serviced by 2 elevators. Aircraft capacity was 48, with 5 or so planes in reserve. Both were completed in 1942. Junyo was commissioned in May and would be part of the Northern Force in the Aleutian Islands during the Battle of Midway. Hiyō was commissioned in July, but would miss the Battle of Santa Cruz in October due to engine problems. Junyo was present during this battle, and its aircraft helped sink the carrier Hornet. In June 1944, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Junyo was hit by 2 bombs and was repaired. Hiyō, however, was hit by 2 torpedoes and was lost due to 2 massive internal explosions. In December 1944, Junyo was hit by 3 torpedoes off the Philippines, surviving, and was towed back to port and never fully repaired. It remained in port for the rest of the war, surrendered to the Allies, and then scrapped in 1946 to 1947. Of the auxiliary ships converted to carriers pre-war, Ryūhō was, in hindsight, the least successful. Starting life as a submarine tender, it started conversion to a light carrier in December 1941 near Tokyo, which was completed in November 1942. Notably, Ryūhō was damaged by B-25s during the famous Doolittle Raid in April 1942. When in service as a carrier, Ryūhō looked similar to the Shōhō-class ships, had 24 aircraft, and had its propulsion updated to destroyer-type turbines from diesel engines. Considered a second-line unit and mainly used as an aircraft ferry, the flight deck was lengthened to 660 feet from the original 607 feet in 1943. Ryūhō's only combat action was during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, where it suffered light damage from multiple bomb misses. In March 1945, it was attacked by American attack aircraft while at Kure, and was never fully repaired as the war ended. Ryūhō was scrapped in 1946 to 1947. The final 2 carriers converted from auxiliaries were Chitose and Chiyoda, which were originally both seaplane tenders commissioned in 1938. Both ships served in this role until after the Battle of Midway, where they were sent to be converted to help mitigate the carrier losses. Both were taken out of service in January 1943. Large bulges were added to increase stability, and their conversions followed a similar suit to the other flush deck-like carriers. Aircraft capacity was around 30 aircraft, and they were capable of higher speeds, making them more useful for fleet work. Chitose was recommissioned in November 1943, and Chiyoda in December, with both being used in the following months on aircraft ferrying missions. Both ships were part of the vanguard force during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, where Chiyoda suffered damage from a single bomb. Their lives as carriers were less than a year long, as on October 25, 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf off the Philippines, they were both used as decoy carriers. Likely hit by 3 torpedoes, Chitose was fatally damaged and quickly sunk, while Chiyoda was hit by 4 bombs and later sunk in the day by U.S. surface forces. Taihō, the first of the wartime fleet carriers to be commissioned, started construction in July 1941. Designed with the Shōkaku-class as the go-by, Taihō departed from the standard Japanese carrier construction practices as it was built with an armored flight deck. With around 3 inches of armor on the flight deck, Taihō was able to withstand a 1,000-pound bomb and continue fighting. Its hangar sides were not armored, but it did have a heavy armor belt for a carrier, up to 5.9 inches. Taihō featured an enclosed bow and a large island, like the Hiyō-class light carriers. Taihō had one less deck to the Shōkaku's, to minimize the center of gravity due to all the armor weight. It was fitted with 2 elevators and 2 hangars, and was home to 75 aircraft. Capable to work in a support carrier role, Taihō would handle additional ordnance and aviation fuel. Completed in March 1944, it would see its only combat action during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. During the battle, Taihō was hit by a torpedo by a submarine, which pierced aviation fuel stores, and hours later suffered a massive explosion. With fires out of control and the hull ruptured, Taihō soon sank. In hindsight, Taihō's loss was attributed to poor damage control. The other Japanese kill-up fleet carrier designed to see action during World War II, the Unryū-class, focused on the large air group, speed, and relatively light armor. In the 1941 to 1942 construction building program, 16 carriers were planned and the ships were based on the Hiryū, rather than the larger and more complex Shōkaku and Taihō designs. 3 ships were laid down in 1942, which are Unryū, Akagi, and Katsuragi. 3 more were laid down in 1943, Kasagi, Ikoma, and Eiso, with all work suspended in 1945. The other ships of the class were ordered, but never laid down. The 3 completed ships used a similar hull design and armor layouts from the Hiryū, with the major difference in design being the island structure moving to the starboard side. 2 elevators were fitted to serve 2 hangars, featuring 63 aircraft, of which 6 were reserves. Unryū and Akagi were able to hit 34 knots, completed with machinery the same as the Sōryū, with Katsuragi receiving 2 sets of destroyer turbines, topping speeds at 33 knots. None of the ships saw any fleet action combat. Unryū was completed in August 1944, and in December would carry the high-priority cargo of Oka suicide rocket aircraft to Manila in the Philippines. After dropping off the cargo on December 19th, Unryū was hit by 2 torpedoes by a submarine, one of which hit her aviation fuel tanks, sealing its fate. Akagi was completed in August after Unryū, and Katsuragi was completed in October. Both would never leave home waters due to the lack of fuel, air group, and air crew shortages. In March 1945, Akagi was damaged in Kure by American aircraft, and then in late July, fatally damaged by 2 days of U.S. airstrikes. Akagi was the last fleet carrier to be sunk during the war. Katsuragi was also damaged in the July raids, however, survived. It was used as a repatriation ship after the war and scrapped in 1946. Originally the third of the Yamato-class battleships, Shinano started conversion to a carrier after the disastrous Battle of Midway. Laid down in May 1940, work was completed up to the main deck around the time of Midway. Plans were soon drawn up to convert Shinano into a support carrier, due to its already impressive protection and ability to carry supplies for other carriers. At around 65,000 tons, Shinano would be the largest carrier completed during World War II and the largest built well into the 1950s, until the U.S. Navy started building supercarriers. Hosting 47 aircraft, mainly for self-protection, and 1 hangar deck, it featured an armored flight deck between the ship's 2 elevators. On the hangar deck, there was a rear hangar that was enclosed and a forward hangar that was open with shutters. Shinano featured a large island with a slanted exhaust funnel. Its belt armor was halved from the Yamato-class battleships, with a still impressive 8 or so inches. Torpedo blisters were added and more armor over machinery spaces. Commissioned on November 18, 1944, Shinano had the shortest career for an Imperial Japanese Navy carrier. On November 29th, while underway from Yokosuka, and not yet fully fit out with waterproofing and counter-flooding control pumps, it was hit by 4 torpedoes from a U.S. submarine. Though there was some counter-flooding, flooding exponentially increased due to incomplete water tightness. Once flooding hit the boiler rooms, Shinano lost power, and its fate was sealed, where it continued flooding and sank with over 1,400 men of the 2,400-man crew. Along with the 2 large passenger liners started in late 1939 for the Hiyō-class light carriers, the Imperial Japanese Navy subsidized the construction of multiple smaller liners earlier on, 3 of which were used for the Taiyō-class escort carriers. In 1937, the 3 Unryū-class liners were under construction, designed specifically to be converted to carriers if needed. The last of the ships being built was requisitioned in 1940 to become the first of the carriers, Taiyō, which was commissioned in September 1941. Considered a relatively simple conversion, it took around 6 months, and the carrier would feature a flush deck, a downward smokestack on the starboard side, new turbines, 2 elevators for a single hangar, and a capacity of 23 aircraft with 4 reserves. The other 2 liners were soon converted after work started on Taiyō and Unryū being completed in May 1942 and Shōhō in November 1942. The main difference between the last 2 built and Taiyō was that they could carry 30 aircraft. The class would mainly be relegated for aircraft ferrying, convoy escort, aircrew training, and support work, and all were submarine torpedo magnets. Hit multiple times over its career, Taiyō was hit a final time by 1 submarine torpedo on August 10, 1944, hitting the aviation fuel tanks, causing an explosion that sank it quickly off the Philippines. Unryū would be hit by 3 submarine torpedoes in January 1944 and miraculously survived. However, would be fatally hit on September 17th by 2 torpedoes southeast of Hong Kong. Unfortunately, it was speculated to be carrying passengers as well, with a high loss of life, with no exact counts. Shōhō, starting its career in November 1942, also performed ferrying runs well into 1943, where it met its fate on December 4th, 1943. Carrying passengers, crew, and American prisoners of war, Shōhō was hit by multiple torpedoes, taking more than 1,200 souls with it off Japan. The smallest of the carrier conversions from passenger liners, the liner Argentina Maru, built in 1938, was requisitioned in December 1942 and came out of the yards in November 1943 as the escort carrier Kaiyō. In similar fashion to the Taiyō-class, Kaiyō had a flush deck, replaced machinery, 2 elevators, 1 hangar, could carry 24 aircraft. Used to ferry aircraft and crew and later escort convoys, it became a training carrier in 1945. Kaiyō was also used as a target ship for kamikaze pilot training and would suffer damage while at Kure during the U.S. airstrikes in March 1945. It would be heavily damaged during the July air raids and fatally hit by B-25 bombers on August 9th. Kaiyō was abandoned and scrapped in place starting in 1946. Originally starting life as a German passenger liner Scharnhorst, the ship was purchased by the Imperial Japanese Navy in February 1942 after it was stuck in Kure, as it was unable to go back to Germany after the war started. Slated for a troop transport role, this was shifted after the Battle of Midway in June 1942, and plans were drawn up for an escort carrier conversion. Shin'yō, as it would be called, would start the conversion in September 1942. As the ship had a similar layout to the Unryū-class ships used to make the Taiyō-class escort carriers, Shin'yō would be converted similarly. Shin'yō would feature additional external bulges for stability and would keep the Scharnhorst's propulsion systems. This flush-decked escort carrier would carry 27 aircraft. Coming into service in December 1943, Shin'yō would be used in the escort fleet. Used as convoy escort to fend off submarines in 1944, it would meet its fate on November 15th. Escorting a convoy towards Singapore, Shin'yō was hit by a speculated 4 torpedoes from a U.S. submarine, causing the aviation fuel tanks to explode, causing the ship to soon sink after. Here's a few charts covering what was discussed in this video. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I appreciate you watching. Be sure to comment below on which Imperial Japanese Navy carrier class is your favorite to learn about.